This program is intended for informational and educational purposes only. All views and opinions expressed are the views and opinions of the individuals and sponsors presenting them, and not the LTB network. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, Episode 12.
On BitcoinAverage.com, a millibit is trading for 51 cents, or $510 per Bitcoin, up significantly from last week's low of $356 per Bitcoin. Things are looking good.
Now that's gravy. Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy, and thanks for joining us today as we podcast from East Nashville, Tennessee. I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lij Shaw.
We're two Bitcoin enthusiasts who love to talk about Bitcoins.
And share what we learn with you, the listener. Welcome to the show, and thanks for listening.
On today's show, Lij and I traveled to Wall Street, in the city so nice they named it twice, New York, New York. While there, we enjoy a lively conversation with our good friend, Wall Street Journal reporter Paul Vigna. Paul once again gives us the lowdown on where Bitcoin stands in the Big Apple and where we can expect to see it going in the coming months.
Next, we travel to the bustling streets of Fort Greene, New York, for a talk with business owner Dan Lee, whose family owns 7 successful businesses that all accept Bitcoin. Dan gives us some insight into how easy it is for a small business to accept Bitcoin and how it really doesn't even make sense not to. So stay right here for more from Bitcoins and Gravy. And remember to call us on the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline with your comments or questions at 615-208-5198. Or simply click on the hotline link from your mobile phone when you visit bitcoinsandgravy.com. Or you can email us at howdy@bitcoinsandgravy.com. Or you can leave us a message in the comments section of SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and here we go.
So, Lij, even though the price of Bitcoin has been low over the past couple of weeks and it's been bothering a lot of people, it hasn't bothered me at all. In fact, the other day I just went to CoinStacks again and I bought some more silver coins.
Right on, man. Well, John, you are pretty unflappable. So tell us, how was your experience buying silver coins?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that compliment. I think it was a compliment. Anyway, it was great. CoinStacks is easy to use. The site is easy to navigate, and I'm looking forward to receiving my silver coins. And if your birthday's coming up, I was thinking maybe I'd give one of them to you, if you're good.
I got to wait a little while for that, but, I will be 21 pretty soon.
Hey, you'll be 21? Wow, that's great.
So tell me more about it.
Now, you're going to have to wait till a little later in the show.
All right, I can do that.
All right, cool.
Stand by, listeners.
We are here once again with our good friend Paul Vigna from the Wall Street Journal. We are thrilled to talk with him again. Paul, welcome to the show.
How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. So glad to have you back, Paul. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Lots of things in the news as far as Bitcoin goes, right?
Yeah, oh my God, a ton. It's unbelievable how much is going on.
Have you been busy with BitBeat?
Oh, yeah. Oh, we've been really busy with it. It's doing pretty well. And, the last couple of months, I think I'm at the point where I'm almost writing about nothing but Bitcoin.
Oh, wow.
And my editors have been really cool because, they want Bitcoin news. So they've been really cool about letting me do it. My job is supposed to be covering the markets. I've become almost completely just a Bitcoin reporter.
Hey, so tell us what you think about the IRS ruling. And I know that there's a Congressman, Steve Stockman, who's asking the IRS to change their ruling and treat Bitcoin as a currency. What's going on with that?
It's funny. The day that happened, I called up the IRS. I called up the guy who wrote the note, and I actually was lucky enough to get him on the phone, and I was talking to him about it. And I said to him, what is this going to do? Because it's interesting. Like, they're in kind of a tough position, the IRS. I mean, they have to come up with sort of a concrete decision on what Bitcoin is, when it's hard to say what Bitcoin is. I mean, we were at, there was a Bitcoin conference up here in New York last week. But Stockman was one guy, he said, go out into that audience, or, that group, he said, ask 10 people, you will get 10 different answers. I mean, there's still a lot of questions about what it is, what it should be, where it's going. So the IRS, I think, had a relatively tough thing that they had to do to come out and just sort of say, this is what it is. I don't know that you can just kind of put Bitcoin into one little bin and say it is this. What they said was that it is property. It is more like a security, an asset like gold or a stock certificate than it is like currency. But they said it's not currency. So they said it's property. It'll be taxed like property. It'll be taxed like a stock, like a stock. You'll have to pay capital gains taxes on it, which is okay. I can see that on the one hand. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it is like a currency. It is a currency. I mean, people use it as a currency. So I think the IRS missed that. Now, to get back to what I was initially saying, the day the ruling came out, I called the guy from the IRS who wrote the note. And he said, well, people who are using it as a currency, they won't have to worry about it. What matters is how you use it, what your intent is in holding the Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, he later came out and said that he misspoke, which is, or whatever. But I thought that was actually a kind of smart take on it that day. And what's really interesting about that is that last week, the Brazilian tax authority came out and said exactly that, and literally said that. They said, we are saying that Bitcoin is property for tax purposes, but they carved out an exemption where if you're holding less than the equivalent of $16,000, it was, whatever, 4,500 real, or whatever that is in Bitcoin, the equivalent of $16,000, they carved out an exemption. If you're less than that, and you are just using it to kind of make purchases, and you don't have to pay the capital gains tax. And I thought that was an interesting take on it. And I really do think that the IRS is going to revise what they wrote initially at some point. They said they wanted comments. They're soliciting comments. They're soliciting opinion. I really do think that they're going to revise what they said initially.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and tell us the name of the guy who made the statement from the IRS again. I think that got swallowed up by Skype.
Oh, yeah, his name was Keith Akey, A-Q-U-I. I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs now, and they see a business angle. They see money to be made. They see a profitable investment. But then you talk to sort of the more libertarian camp type people, and to them it's a cause, it's a crusade, it's a reason to make the world better, and that's great. To me as a journalist, it's a story. I think it's a great story. It's a different way of illustrating a lot of the problems we have in the world today. I mean, I don't know whether Bitcoin's going to go somewhere or not go somewhere. I think it's going to go somewhere. I mean, if I had to lean one way or another, I'd say it's going to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, with that in mind, the IRS ruling, when, the concept of it being a property has a lot to do with it going somewhere. And that's certainly why it affects people. What are your feelings about them coming out and saying something at all? Is it better that they came out and said something than to have said nothing at all?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely think so. And a lot of people made that point. They said, look, just the fact that the Internal Revenue Service is acknowledging it as something is a positive. And they're right about that. It is. It's a positive, and you can make a decent argument that it is property, that it is, security and asset. I mean, that's fine. You can make that argument.
Sure.
Personally, I disagree with it. I think it's currency.
Do you think there's a benefit one way or the other?
I think it's more beneficial as a currency. I mean, I think its real value is as a payment system, as a way, as a means to do commerce, as a means to do business between people in a digital age. I think it is more valuable in that sense than it is as property. I think it's more valuable, to say that it's the equivalent of gold or a stock certificate, it's something that you're just kind of using to sit on, the proverbial store of value. I don't think that's where you get the most potential out of Bitcoin. I think you get the most potential out of it as a currency, as a thing that people use in their day-to-day life.
The Bitcoin Foundation came out and they said that they think Bitcoin should be considered based on the usage. So if you're using it as a currency, then it's considered a currency and taxed accordingly. If you're using it to invest as an investment vehicle or what have you, then it should be treated like a property.
And how else is it going to gain value unless it's being used as a means of exchange?
Right. Yeah. And, I think another aspect of this that it brings up is the fact that Bitcoin, in a lot of ways, it's its own thing. It's a new thing. It is its own thing. And you can't exactly pigeonhole it into these old classifications. And, I mean, that might be a far more nuanced view than the Internal Revenue Service would ever take on it. But I think you can make a legitimate argument that this is an absolutely new thing, and you should consider it as a new thing rather than just try to say, oh, it's property, oh, it's currency, so it'll be taxed like this or that. I would love to see them actually just say, we understand that this is a new thing, and we're going to try to figure it out on its own merit. I don't know that they'll do that, but that would be interesting.
It would. So what Stockman's doing, how do you think that's going to fare? Have you seen any historical precedent set where the IRS reversed anything?
Not yet. And I mean, he even said to me, he said, look, I'm not trying to get this passed. I just kind of want to drum up conversation. And to that extent, he might be successful. It's funny, I talked to 2 other congressmen during last week, too. And, this is something that some folks in Congress are really starting to look at. They're really interested in. They're, beyond, the IRS issue especially, but beyond the IRS issue, what is Bitcoin and what should we do about it? I think the IRS was in sort of a difficult position. They had to say something. I think it was the first move. I don't think it'll be their last thing. It'll be interesting, too, to see what happens in Congress, because you really do have a couple of people in Congress, and they seem genuinely interested in it. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't seem like they're trying to just get a handle on it in terms of how can we control this. And look, I mean, I can only tell you what my impression of talking to them, but they seem to genuinely interested in learning about it, figuring out what the value of it is, and how they could help.
Finally, they're admitting it's not tulips anymore, right? And it's not a Ponzi scheme. It's a real thing. And you see all the infrastructure, all the venture capital coming into it. Hey, these guys aren't goofing around. They're coming into it for a reason, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every day, another business doing this, another operation doing this, people doing this. I mean, this has legs. And again, I don't have to tell you guys I'm preaching to the choir, and I would imagine your listeners feel the same way, but this is just starting.
Well, hearing this from you, for some of our listeners, a lot of our listeners are new to Bitcoin and they don't really know what to think. So to hear Paul Vigna from the Wall Street Journal saying, hey, this thing has legs, that's huge. They know it's up and running, and just the whole image of it having legs. Oh, man.
Well, so...
No, you don't want that.
Yeah, I do. No.
In that spirit of recognizing Bitcoin and knowing it's here to stay, there's also this issue of trying to take this new technology and put old ideas on it. And you were writing about, Jeremy Allaire, I guess that was at the Inside Bitcoins conference in New York, where they're talking about, really supporting the idea of regulating it in some form or other. I mean, it seemed that the recent New York conference may have been more focused on the legality of Bitcoin than, say, the Texas conference or Miami in the past.
Yeah, the New York conference, I mean, look, this is New York. This is the financial capital. The money smells something and they go to it. This conference last year, they held it in a hotel ballroom. It really had a big sort of counterculture feeling about it. Very passionate, very Kent Revival, a definite vibe.
Yeah.
This year, they held it at the Javits Center because it got so much bigger. And you still had that. I mean, people are very passionate about Bitcoin, and that's not going to change. But on top of that, you had a lot of money talking. It was very interesting. And the Allaire speech, I wasn't there for that. My partner, Mike Casey, wrote that up. So I can't really speak to that as well. But you definitely had a sense that these guys are P&L, profit and loss businessmen. They smell an opportunity. They smell a real opportunity. And they are going to put money into this thing with the goal of building a long-term system, a long-term ecosystem, you want to call it or whatever, but a long-term profitable business that is part of this entire world of digital currency.
Yeah, make sure this sandbox has got some sides on it, a little bit of a safety to the playground aspect,
Yeah.
Right. It's a great way to describe it. Exactly. I mean, they are definitely building the sides of the sandbox.
Let me ask you what you think about China and the People's Bank of China. Do you think, according to the article that you wrote on BitBeat, do you think that they are softening? And is that something that's coming down from the government, or is it a banking thing? What's going on there?
Help us understand China.
Yeah, help us understand China.
I often feel like most of what's going on in the Bitcoin world is happening all the way across the world, and it really doesn't have anything to do with me over here.
No.
It's such a squirrely thing, what's going on in China. And one of the guys, CEO of BTC China, his name is Bobby Lee, and they're big Bitcoin exchange over there. What's going on is that it appears that the People's Bank of China, kind of through back channels, has told private banks in China that they should not be handling Bitcoin-denominated business. So deposits, transaction services, all that kind of stuff, they don't want the banks handling.
Okay.
But again, it's all apparent. There's been no announcement that that's the case.
A lot of rumor.
Yeah. So some of these other exchanges, though, have gotten notices from banks saying we're not going to take deposits, we're not going to do transaction services. But BTC China, Bobby Lee, has not gotten any messages like that. So it's a weird thing. It appears to be sort of a back channel effort. So some banks are getting the message, maybe some banks aren't. The head of the People's Bank, in a speech, he said something along the lines of, "We will not outlaw Bitcoin." And everybody got excited about that. Great. So you have these sort of conflicting mixed messages about what the state of Bitcoin really is in China. One thing I guess you can take away is that it is not going to be banned. They can make it harder to do business in China. And that's one of the things that Bobby Lee said. He said, look, even if they're doing this sort of in a back channel way, that has an effect. That makes it harder for us to do business. Yeah. So even if they don't come right out and ban it, this is not an unusual way for the People's Bank to actually conduct business, kind of do these things through back channels.
Interesting.
Seems that they're not exactly comfortable with Bitcoin, but they don't want to ban it outright.
Right.
I mean, that's my take on it from everything I've read and the people I've talked to.
Yeah, I keep wondering if the United States, China, Russia, I keep wondering if these countries are looking at each other and watching each other and saying, hey, let's wait and see exactly what they do over the next year or two, and then let's make a decision based on that. What do you think about that? Any of the countries looking at what the other countries are doing?
I don't know, because I think, there's like a visceral reaction in places like Russia and China where they want to tightly control things.
Right.
Russia already came out and said, look, the ruble's a currency, that's it. So I don't know that they're really looking towards the United States to see what the U.S. is going to do about it. But, I mean, maybe, when you think about Western world governments, yeah, some of them are probably looking at each other saying, I wonder what they're doing about it. I think there's some element of that. But also there's, especially in government, they're still just wrapping their heads around it. The ones that kind of get it, that are clued in already and are interested in it, I think, I'm sure they're looking overseas to see what's going on. Yeah. But I don't know that you have sort of any kind of, institutional response to it in terms of one way or the other. Let's see what, China does, or let's not care about what China does.
I like to imagine governments having briefings. They have a Bitcoin briefing once a week. So the leader of the country calls the Bitcoin group in and they say, okay, brief me on what's going on with Bitcoin this week. And they brief them and they shake their heads and they leave for lunch. I don't know.
Hey, do you guys watch Portlandia?
I love Portlandia. I haven't seen it recently, but tell us, has Bitcoin made it into Portland?
So you talk about Bitcoin being absorbed into the popular culture, this kind of thing. Yeah, they made a Bitcoin reference on an episode of Portlandia.
Oh, yeah.
My wife saw it and she played it for me later. She said, you got to see this, They made a very brief reference to Bitcoin and a bit about, no pun intended, a couple they started treating each other as lovingly as they treated the dog.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're like, we're stale. Why don't we ever see, like they love the dog, but they don't love each other. So they treat each other like the dog. And there's a little reference to Bitcoin in there. And my wife had to show it to me because she said, I've never seen anyone besides you talk about this.
Did they end it by saying cacao? Another Portlandia reference.
Yeah, Portlandia it's a really funny show. To me, a lot of it is more than just a technology. It's something that grabs people on a very visceral level, and they respond to it, and they see something in it that fills a gap that they perceive in the real world. And I think that's why you see so much passion around it. And to me, that's a very interesting aspect of it. And to me, I think that is something that is only going to grow as well.
Do you see that same sort of reaction in any other markets or any other currencies, or is this
no,
seems like it's pretty unique in that aspect?
Nobody writes songs about PayPal. I mean, no. You guys had Laura on. She did her song.
Oh yeah, Laura Sagers.
I sing a sad song about PayPal when I need.
Yeah. And you introduced us to Laura Sagers. Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, she was wonderful. Yeah. It was great to have her on the show. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and you guys did your song. That's a sign of something that is more than just a technology.
Yep. Yeah. Well, what else do you see in the Bitcoin arts? A topic that comes up for me a lot in the music industry is how is Bitcoin going to come along and help out the music industry or any of the arts? The arts exist in this world of digital distribution, sort of a diminishing value in a certain way. And so it'd be wonderful to see if this stuff can help in those markets. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah.
there was a Canadian funk electronica band. I'm blanking on their name now. I wrote a little thing about them a couple of weeks ago. They started selling an album through a BitTorrent site and taking Bitcoin for it.
Nice.
And I thought that was a really interesting way to go about it. And they did it again. They said, look, their business manager, I think, was the first guy that knew about Bitcoin. And they thought it was interesting. They wanted to try it out. And actually, I haven't gotten back to them, so I don't know how the experiment went. So, yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how things like that turn out.
You wrote something, Paul, about, I think in one of your articles, how Bitcoin was a payment option last week for the attendees at the Security Traders Association of New York's annual dinner and conference. Is that right?
The New York State Securities Traders Association, they took Bitcoin as a payment. You could pay with Bitcoin.
Wow.
And it was funny. One of the reasons my buddy Mike Casey, he talked to the guys organizing it, and one of the things they said was, look around the room. They said this to Mike. They said, look around the room. Look at the average age of these guys. We have to figure out a way to bring the younger guys into our organization. And they thought Bitcoin was one way to do that because it's, you would think a younger crowd would be more clued into that. So they took Bitcoin as payment for the dinner.
Do you know if it worked?
I do think it worked to an extent. I don't know how successful it was. I mean, I think they definitely got some Bitcoin-related business.
Some is good. Some is good in Bitcoin.
So, yeah, some of the people there were definitely interested because there were a couple of sort of heated debates going on about it. So there were people on different sides of it. So there were definitely some younger people there that were interested in it.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about what your feelings were about some of these things that are considered next in the world of Bitcoin and blockchains and stuff like that. You've got all these things like BitShares and Mastercoin and Colored Coin and Ethereum, and you hear about these new developments in Bitcoin, which are less currency and more ways to have decentralized shares. And to me, that strikes of, traditional market, but in a decentralized way. So I thought you might have some comment, strong feelings about that.
I think that is amazingly nascent. I mean, it's really just starting.
Yeah.
But the potential is absolutely mind-blowing. I mean, it is just, you sit down. I sat down, actually it was a dinner Monday night around the Bitcoin conference that I got invited to. And I ended up talking to one of these guys, an entrepreneur, and I mean, the things he was saying were just, you talk about decentralized corporations. It's not a technological leap at all. It might be a psychological leap, but it's not a technological leap. I mean, you can see where the blockchain can be used as a ledger of property, as a ledger of housing deeds and stock certificates and all these things. It's amazing because all it really does is it takes a value, fixes it in time and space, and assigns it to an owner.
Yeah,
and that's
exactly.
it. And, it gets used now for Bitcoin, the currency, but there's no reason it can't be used for anything. And there are people who are absolutely focused on this, and they are working to make this happen. The only thing that would keep it from happening is, again, the same thing as what keeps people from getting involved in Bitcoin in the first place is just that whole trust issue. Do you trust this math-based encryption, cryptography-based system? And once you get past that, there's no reason that you would.
I was talking with a young woman in finance the other day, and she had never heard of Bitcoin, or she'd heard of it peripherally anyway. So I said to her, look, here's what it does. Here's what Bitcoin, the blockchain, is capable of doing. For the very first time in the history of the world, you're able to take value and pass it to somebody else right next to you or on the other side of the world without a third party, without a middleman there. And it's a guaranteed transaction that everybody can see, verified by everybody that can view it on the public ledger. And I finally had her understand it. But when she finally understood it, her first comment was, oh, this is going to be a nightmare for money laundering. And I said, it's like, well, why can't you think about the positive things of it? So the very next thing I said to her was, well, think about the blockchain as a way for nonprofit organizations to be able to say to the people who have donated to them, look, here's where your money is, here's where your money's going, and you can track it from the time you donate to us until the time it goes out to the people that we're giving it to. And I think that right there there is so much more important than worrying about the people who are going to do nefarious things and worrying about the money laundering. For me, that's kind of like television thinking versus real world. How can we help each other thinking?
I thought you were going to say that finally when she understood it, the bill came and she looked at it and said, how are we going to pay for this, John?
I said, we're going Dutch, honey. We're going Dutch.
Break out the blockchain.
Oh, man. Any other final words, Paul? Final words of wisdom for us, man? You're right there, the heartbeat of Wall Street, the bit beat, right? And, man, we would love to be there. I mean, we're in Nashville, and, it's small potatoes here as far as what goes on in the world of finance or Bitcoin. But, man, you're right there, and that must be exciting on so many different levels.
Yeah, it is. But, what's funny is I kind of want to get down to you guys.
Oh, come on down.
I'm not kidding. Like, I'm interested in seeing, like, I've only seen it from the perspective of being here in Manhattan. Like, I want to come down to you guys and see what it's like outside of here. You might have a grass is greener thing going on, but I do too.
Well, the grass is actually pretty green here right now.
It really is.
Spring has sprung
sure it is.
in East Nashville.
And you are always welcome here, Paul.
We always love having you back on the show, and we look forward to having you here again. In fact, if you'd ever like to, we would love to have you on the show along with another guest or another couple of guests and have a discussion at some point.
I would love to, man. I love the show. I really do.
Oh, thank you so much. And, hey, Paul, give our regards to Broadway and Wall Street and every other street there in New York City, man. Thank you so much.
I'll be walking down there later today, so I will.
Oh, man,
All
that's
right,
great.
Well, thank you so much, Paul. We'll talk to you soon, and I look forward to reading what you write.
Yep. All right, fellas. Thanks.
Hey, thanks, Paul.
Paul, would you like to tell our listeners one last time how they can find you?
Yeah, I write for the Money Beat blog on the Wall Street Journal, so just wsj.com/moneybeat. I think that's the URL. And my Twitter handle is just @Paul Vigna, my name. You want to follow me on Twitter. And we do a daily show on WSJ Live, also called Money Beat. So I'm easily accessible.
Excellent.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon, and enjoy the spring up there.
All right. Talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lid Shaw.
We're two guys from East Nashville, Tennessee who love talking about Bitcoin. Join us for Bitcoins and Gravy right here on KCAA 1050 AM each Monday night at 5 p.m. as we talk with business owners around the country and around the world who are using Bitcoins right now to grow their businesses.
We interview Bitcoin experts about cutting-edge developments, the future of Bitcoin the currency, and Bitcoin the shared network. We also talk with everyday folks who use Bitcoins instead of money for everyday purchases.
And if you're still not sure about Bitcoins, we can help. Bitcoins and Gravy will get you up to speed with this new fast-paced technology, Bitcoin. We invite you, the listener, to call us on the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline at 615-208-5198 with your questions or comments about Bitcoin.
And remember to tune in right here to KCAA 1050 AM every Monday night at 5 p.m. for Bitcoins and Gravy.
Now that's gravy. This is John Barrett, and I've got a message for you. I bought my first silver coins online from CoinStacks in October of last year. Then just last week, I bought some Buffalo silver rounds, which are a really beautiful 1-ounce silver coin that looks like a big old Buffalo nickel. But the best part was paying with Bitcoin. I'm telling you, turning my Bitcoin into 1-ounce silver coins made me feel like a modern-day alchemist. And I love CoinStacks because they only offer products that are in stock, so you get your silver or gold fast. That's right, fully insured, fast shipping within 5 business days. So look, when it comes to diversifying a portfolio and protecting your wealth, let's get real. There's no better way that I know of right now than investing in gold and silver, and Bitcoin, of course. So take a tip from John here at Bitcoins and Gravy and leverage some of that Bitcoin. Buy gold or silver online today from coinstacks.com. That's COINSTAX, coinstacks.com.
On today's Bitcoins and Gravy hotline, we get a call from Matt in Dallas, Texas. Matt tells us how excited he is about solar coins.
Hey, Liz and John. My name's Matt, and I'm coming to you from sunny Dallas, Texas. I've definitely listened to your show for quite a while now, about as long as you can, and I'm excited about it. I can't believe you guys are doing this. Thank you for getting some good coverage from East Tennessee, or I guess the Nashville area. I want to definitely hear more about solar coins. I know you guys have already done a piece on solar coins, but personally, I would love to hear more information about it all the time. I really think that it is the alt currency of the future. It's really the only currency heard of in the crypto world that has a built-in gold standard. So I'm really excited about it. Personally, I started mining the coins since listening to your show. I think there's a little bit less than 400 total miners in the world at this point right now. So I definitely think that the coverage is still really, really young, but I think in a year it's going to be a really exciting technology. So I hope you guys will bring on more experts about Solar Coin, maybe the Solar Coin Foundation themselves. But anyway, keep doing a great job, guys. You're doing fantastic. Thank you for supporting this community, and hopefully we'll hear more about Solar Coin soon. Thank you, guys.
Matt, thanks so much for calling in on the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline. Next episode, we're also going to be bringing you comments from SoundCloud, or email us at howdy@bitcoinsandgravy.com.
Today, Lidge and I are speaking with Dan Lee in Fort Greene, New York. Dan's family owns a number of businesses, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, that each one of those businesses accepts Bitcoin. Is that right?
That is correct.
Wow, that's great. Welcome to the show, Dan. Welcome to Bitcoins and Gravy. We're glad to have you on here, and this is pretty exciting news to hear about this zone of stores you've created.
Yes, indeed. So, Dan, tell us about your stores, your family, how you guys got involved in Bitcoin, and how you started accepting Bitcoin.
Well, luckily, I actually come from, I guess, a small business background. My parents and I, we've been in the Fort Greene area for close to 30 years, and so we've been in this area for quite a while. My parents started with an all-natural organic grocery store, and we have 3 going on 5 now. We also own a gourmet pizza shop, a Japanese Asian fusion cuisine restaurant, and a nail salon. So we've been in the Fort Greene area ever since then. My whole goal with Bitcoin was to really just kind of get it promoted. It was kind of a novel idea initially, just to kind of see what kind of feedback we would get from it, to see what it would work in a kind of real world brick and mortar type setting.
That's great. That's really cool. That's an amazing list of businesses that you guys have all accepting Bitcoin. That would be quite an outing to go and get all those things.
Let's go.
Tell us a little bit about Fort Greene. What is that demographic like? I mean, is there anything particular about the location where you are that Bitcoin might be more or less accepted than other places?
Yeah, Fort Greene has a lot of history behind it. The changes, when we first arrived and to see where it is today is complete 360 degree. Like it's night and day. Believe it or not, Fort Greene used to actually be one of the worst neighborhoods in New York City, and today where it is probably one of the most sought after locations in all of Brooklyn.
Wow, which means it's not cheap to live there, right?
It is absolutely not.
That sounds like a description of East Nashville. It's changing rapidly compared to when I moved here 14 years ago. So tell us, are any of these particular businesses seeing a higher use of Bitcoin than the others?
Well, I can tell you that the store that does the most volume in terms of Bitcoin transactions is actually our all-natural organic grocery store. We've been accepting Bitcoins at all the locations now for over a year. I would say for the first, few months or so, we didn't have a single transaction. I had the signs up and, I was talking to people when they came in about it. And a lot of questions, a lot of things in terms of, what it was, how to use it, what the benefits were, and things like that. But there was not a single transaction probably for the first, I would say, 2-3 months. And then we had one person that somehow heard about it, made his way down, and actually took a picture, posted it on Twitter, Instagram, and put it on Reddit. And honestly, I have to give a lot of credit to Reddit, actually, because it was probably because of Reddit that where we started seeing an uptick in volume on the number of transactions for Bitcoin.
Reddit seems to be the original Bitcoin zone, or at least in my experience it is.
Oh, yeah.
It was honestly over the course of, I would say, maybe a week, it was night and day in terms of, the person that, the customer that originally posted it, he came by the store the other day, probably a few days afterwards, and was like, I put it on Reddit, and there's been tremendous response. And then from there on out, it went from, not one single transaction to now we probably average, 5 a day between all the stores.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. That shows great resilience and patience on your part, too, to put it up there for the stores and then just kind of have the faith that it will come around. If you build it, it will come.
Yeah,
That's right.
in a way, it was kind of like that because, people that are, that enjoy or, that want to utilize Bitcoin, they're very passionate about it, and they'll actively seek out businesses that are willing to accept it. I know a few customers off the top of my head where, they say that they're fully vested in Bitcoin, and so they actually travel from Manhattan to Brooklyn every week to do their grocery shopping, to, have a dinner out and do things like that.
So what initially got you interested in Bitcoin? Where did you first hear about it, and how did you convince your parents, hey, this is something we should do?
Well, I first heard about Bitcoin through a friend of mine. It was probably towards the end of 2009. He's heavily into computers, programming, development, and he touched into cryptocurrencies before. And so it was one of those things where in passing, he mentioned it to me. He's an avid believer in it. And it was one of those situations to where kind of dumb luck on my part, in the sense that, that I was able to kind of put a little bit of faith in terms of what he told me about it. And other than that, it was really along the lines of, it made news when it hit Yahoo front page, I think is where I read it. And I was kind of like, because I hadn't heard anything on it since then. And it was one of those things where we happened to be doing a complete renovation at the store. And we were doing a major overhaul with the point of sale systems and everything. And I thought it would be kind of, honestly, kind of a cool gimmick to kind of see what would happen if we were to do something like that. And so I went up to my parents. I said, hey, I think that, let's try and accept Bitcoin. And, obviously they had no idea what that was. And so I told them, if when everything's said and done, if it tanks and it bottoms out, I'll cover whatever was purchased in Bitcoin so that there's no risk element on your end. So they were like, okay, let's try it. And at that time, I'm trying to remember what it was trading at, but needless to say, I mean, my parents were pretty happy once once everything started kind of climbing upwards there.
Well, man, you've got cool parents that they were able to grasp what you were talking about and agree to start accepting Bitcoins. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, no, I give them a lot of credit. I mean, they, my parents have always kind of been open-minded in terms of that. Like, for example, even the organic grocery store, this is something way before Whole Foods. This is something, where we were the first, all-natural organic grocery store in Brooklyn. Actually, one of the first in quite a while, because we're talking 25 years ago. We would have people that actually would travel from the city to do organic grocery shopping just because there weren't any options available at that time.
Brooklyn is amazing for organic groceries. My brother's in Brooklyn, and they're part of a co-op there that I know has been around for a while too.
Oh yeah. Co-ops are definitely a very big thing, especially here in Brooklyn. I mean, just in Fort Greene, I know of 2 or 3 that's right around the area that do very well, that have a lot of support from the community and the neighborhood. And it's one of those things to where Brooklyn, culturally, ethnically, I mean, there's so much diversity in all around, and it's kind of one of those things where cohesively as a community, you kind of see people drawing together towards the organic, all natural side of it. And so it's been fun to watch. It's been fun.
Do you also find people in the neighborhood drawing closer together when it comes to Bitcoin, the Bitcoin community? So do you all feel like you're trendsetters there?
It's funny. I actually, I don't think Brooklyn is there yet in terms of that. And the reason why I say that is because I know in the city, in Manhattan, there's quite a few Bitcoin communities and groups that have formed. And I know that they meet regularly, and there's some large ones. And I know a few people that have actually tried to start a Bitcoin meetup group in Brooklyn that, that has had some success, but not nearly the amount that they've had in Manhattan. So, I mean, I definitely think it'd be great to see. I'm definitely a proponent of it. I've always, anyone that's ever came to me and said, hey, we'd like to do something like a Bitcoin meetup group. Can we do it at your restaurant? And, I've done it a few times for them. And it's, I definitely would love to see it grow and expand more.
Well, I got an idea. Why don't you just open up another pizza place right here in East Nashville, and we'll help you out.
Oh, there you go. That's it, man. Hey, I'll toss pizzas if we're going to accept Bitcoins there, man. I'm ready.
Yeah, it's actually funny. The couple that was traveling around the world with Bitcoin, they stopped by Lean Crust when they came to New York.
Oh, yeah. Those guys were in the news, right?
Yeah, so Wall Street Journal was following them around, so they did a little piece on us about that as well, too. And it's been funny. I want to say, after we started accepting it, Bitcoin started making the news, and sure enough, I would say within the course of between August and November, I probably did 30 interviews with TV, newspaper, local papers, and the media attention that it got in such a short period of time was phenomenal. And, obviously that was, but my whole thing was at that point, especially when doing interviews was, there's still, I would still say, less than 5% of the population actually know about Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And to see, and I feel that there's a lot of, misguided information that's being kind of shot out. And so, it's been, it's been an obstacle that I think that the Bitcoin community has kind of been dealing with, especially in the fact that the association and stigma that's still kind of associated with it even now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's sad.
Have you thought of having an ATM in one of your stores or getting involved in that in any way to try and get more of your customers access to Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I looked into the RoboCoin unit, and they require a money transmitter license. It was just a little bit more legwork that I wanted to kind of put into at the time. I also looked into, I think it's called the Laviso machine, because I was at the Bitcoin convention in Las Vegas, and that's when I first learned about the Laviso machine, and they were just saying, it differs from state to state on what the requirements are, and so I held off at that point. But actually, it's funny, because I guess of the number of businesses that we do have that accept Bitcoin, I've probably set up over 200 people with wallets and sold them Bitcoins and stuff like that.
Wow, you're becoming a Bitcoin consultant, a Bit consultant.
It's kind of funny, and where they would come and either ask me about it, or I'd be happen to be at the stores or at the restaurant, and or they would ask for me specifically because I guess either they saw me on the news or they read about it, and so my workers will call me and say, hey, we got someone here that wants to know about Bitcoin, so I'll run over there, because luckily all the businesses are within kind of like a 3-block radius,
right?
So it's something to where I can easily kind of maneuver myself around.
Man, that's pretty neat. Sounds like a great community you have there.
Do you ever tell people after you set them up with your wallet that one of these days I'm going to have to call you and ask you for a favor?
Well, it's funny actually, because when we first started accepting Bitcoin, none of the employees knew what it was or how to accept it or what to do with it. And so I did kind of these mini training sessions with everyone in terms of, just kind of on the very, very basics of it, in terms of, and obviously just how to accept it. And a few of them actually picked it up very early on, and so they've they definitely benefited from it thus far. So they've been pretty happy so far.
So here in Nashville, I'm working on getting one retail spot to accept Bitcoin. The guy's agreed to accept Bitcoin as soon as he moves his store. So we're excited. We're going to have kind of a flash mob with our Bitcoin meetup group here and go and support the business, try to get the media out there. And then, once we get one, we'll try to get another one and try to get another one and do what some people are calling a Bitcoin zone. Sounds like you guys really have a good Bitcoin zone there in the city. Now, when you accept Bitcoin at one of your stores, are you using one of the payment platforms, Coinbase or BitPay, or one of those?
When we first did, I did go with, I went with BitPay. Coinbase hadn't started their merchant services yet at that point. So BitPay was probably really the only choice at the time. So I went with them initially. And then, I think it's a great, using a payment processor is great when you're starting out and not really knowing, what to do in terms of how to allocate it in a way, or also, I think the biggest deterrent for small businesses to accept Bitcoin is the volatility of the market. And, payment processors are nice because they take away that risk by, converting it to US dollars as soon as you receive it. So it takes away that risk aspect of it. So it's great in that regard. But when it comes down to it, I think if you have a general knowledge of it and how to accept it, then, it's not, is it really needed? I don't think so. Right now, I don't use any payment processors when we accept Bitcoin. So I just set up, each store has an individual online wallet.
I see. So from the merchant's perspective, that requires some faith in Bitcoin, right? Because you're no longer protected by BitPay or Coinbase. So, the volatility, any gains or any losses, the merchant, you're going to be the one to accept that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always kind of been a believer in it, just in terms of, how the Bitcoin network is and the protocol works is one of the main reasons why I think it has the best chance. But yeah, there's definitely an added risk by doing it in that fashion. But again, it's one of those situations to where, I've spoken to a number of business owners in the neighborhood that have asked me about it. And, I tell them, each business is different, but a lot of people will look at Bitcoin now as an investment vehicle. I look at it, you can look at it, purely as a payment vehicle, just like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover. It's just another option that you give your customers to make a payment. And so, that's the way that I try and tell other business owners to look at it, is not look at it as an investment, as a skeptical investment, but just look at it as a payment vehicle. And if you're worried about the volatility of it, there are payment processors there to take away that risk aspect of it.
Yeah, and then what are some of the benefits of using it as a payment?
One is going to be the fact that it's simple, it's easy to use, there's no chargebacks, it's definitely lower in fees. For example, I had one customer, he came in, and I don't know how it is in Nashville, but like in Brooklyn or smaller communities here in New York, a lot of places that accept credit card will have minimum. Mm-hmm. And so like, for example, we would have a $10 minimum for our credit card machines. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, if someone comes in and wants to buy, let's say a gallon of milk, and that's like, $3 or $4, normally they wouldn't be able to use a credit card if they didn't have cash. But because the fees are so much lower on Bitcoin that, we were able to process that. So in terms of things like that, the benefits, it's cheaper. There's no chargebacks. And I mean, those two aspects alone it beats out credit cards every day.
Well, that's interesting because, everybody's got a different definition of what a micropayment is. In Brooklyn, $5 is a micropayment. Well, so let me ask you this, Dan. We've referenced your area being a Bitcoin zone, and that was something that Anthony Galippi with BitPay talked about with us on the show, about the benefit of creating a Bitcoin zone, which you've done. And so give us more advice to other people that might want to create a Bitcoin zone in an area they're at. What advice would you have for starting a Bitcoin zone and how it's been a benefit in your area?
Right, because we want a Bitcoin zone here, and I'm sure many of our listeners listening in small towns all over the United States and medium-sized towns and just neighborhoods in Chicago or where have you. I'm sure that there are people who want to have a Bitcoin zone and don't know how to start.
I think the biggest thing is really the fact that, I guess the biggest hurdle for someone that wants to utilize Bitcoin in terms of as a consumer is obviously getting the business to accept it. And, from a business owner standpoint, obviously is, you don't want to take on too much risk, especially for when you're taking payment on goods or services that you're providing. But the truth of the matter is, if you were to take Bitcoin as a payment protocol and, let's say you have cash, you have checks, you have credit cards, and you have Bitcoin, and you have those 4 payment options, and you put all 4 payment options in a paper bag so you didn't know which one was what, and you were to list the pros and cons for each one, almost 10 times out of 10, every business would actually choose Bitcoin because if you have checks, there's almost no small business that accepts personal checks anymore. With cash even, a lot of places here in Brooklyn or in New York, won't accept $50 bills or $100 bills because of the counterfeit issues. Credit cards, obviously, every type of currency that you can imagine will always have an inherent risk. Whether it be counterfeits, whether it'll be chargebacks, whether it be fraud or anything like that, there's always going to be an inherent risk when it comes to currency. Mm-hmm. And the thing with Bitcoin, what's nice about it is actually it's a simple payment system directly from consumer to merchant. So you take out the whole third-party aspect of it, which is nice, which is what cash does. So when we're running the sales through the point-of-sale systems, we treat it like cash. So it gets rung up the same way. At the end, though, the only difference is instead of processing it like a credit card payment or a cash payment, we actually process it as a check. So that lets us know which payments were received in Bitcoin because we don't accept checks.
So when you accept a payment in Bitcoin right now, there's basically no charge, or there's a small transaction fee, a mining fee on there. And so, whereas if you were to accept a credit card, there's at least 3% on the card, right?
Correct. Plus, the funny thing is credit cards is a convenience that business owners provide for the consumer. It's actually geared solely for the consumer benefit because, like, if we take a payment through credit cards, we don't see that money for anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, after the transaction's already been settled. And then just to accept credit cards, you have statement fees, processing fees, merchant fees. There's transaction fees. There's quite a number of fees. And then not only that, if you don't hold on to your receipts, there's a potential for chargebacks, which means that, let's say a couple months down the road, someone disputes a charge, the money gets taken out of your account first, and it's on you as a business owner to provide proof that transaction was legitimate.
Well, I guess one of the things that I was thinking about is at the point at which Bitcoin starts fluctuating within a 3% margin, at least over significant lengths of time, then it's going to be a bit of a no-brainer that that's a risk worth taking, You'll be operating within the margin that you would have lost on credit card sales.
That's true.
Right. That's true, too.
Dan, I have a question for you. So tell our listeners, they come into one of your businesses, let's say they come in to get a pizza, and they order the pizza, and they take out their phone, or their pad or whatever, and they're going to pay with Bitcoin. As soon as they pay with Bitcoin, they scan your QR code, I assume, right? And they pay with Bitcoin. As the merchant, are you worried about the verifications? Are you worried about the time it takes, or do you assume that it's going through once you see that the transaction is complete?
Well, I don't actually. We don't wait for confirmation. So as soon as it goes through, we don't have them wait around. I've never had a case ever of any type of mishap in that regard. No case of double spends or anything like that. So if it was for large amounts, then I would possibly maybe wait for a confirmation or two. But for daily transactions, I don't even have them wait for one. So as soon as it goes through, as soon as we get the notification that the payment was sent, then we consider it done.
Okay, but what about the super deluxe triple layer pizza with the pepperoni and the mushrooms and the onions on it?
Oh, you're killing me. I'm getting hungry. Cut it out, Lidge.
Coupled with the nails next door.
Well, I can tell you that our largest single purchase was probably close to 300, and the same situation. I didn't wait for confirmation. My viewpoint is really the knowledge and the steps that you would have to take to do all of that for, $10, $20, $100 transaction. I just feel it's just not worth it.
Hey, Dan, thank you so much for joining us on the show and for enlightening us about your Bitcoin zone right there in Fort Greene, New York.
Thank you so much, Dan Lee. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
I had a lot of fun. I thank you guys very much.
Take it easy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much to our guests on today's show, Paul Vigna and Dan Lee. We would also like to give a special thank you to one of our sponsors on the show, MicTech, the Nashville company that provides our microphones. We have been using the fabulous PM9 microphones for our podcasts since day one, and we owe our award-winning sound to MicTech. To find out more about our guests and sponsors, visit our show notes at bitcoinsandgravy.com, episode 12. Thank you so much for listening. We greatly appreciate your time and attention.
Hey, Lidge, let's also give a special thanks to our friends in Southern California listening in on station KCAA, 1050 AM. Tune in Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific Time to hear new episodes of Bitcoins and Gravy. And make sure to catch more great shows from the Let's Talk Bitcoin Network airing all week right here on KCAA 1050 AM, or download all the podcasts from letstalkbitcoin.com or directly from iTunes. And remember the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline. Have you ever wanted to be a podcaster? Then call us at 615-208-5198 and leave us a message with your comments or questions. If you give us permission, we'll put you on the show. So call anytime, 615-208-5198. That's right, that's the Bitcoins and Gravy hotline. If you enjoyed the show, please take a moment and leave a review or comment on iTunes or SoundCloud. Let us know what you like or where we can improve.
And remember, it's your reviews that help new listeners discover Bitcoins and Gravy, plus all the other great shows on the Let's Talk Bitcoin Podcast Network. And it's your generous tips that allow us to create the shows.
I'm John Barrett.
And I'm Lidge Shaw, and you've been listening to
Bitcoins and Gravy from East Nashville, Tennessee.